Thank you. I figured I'm just going to sit here and be sort of conversational with you guys. I was telling Miss Gaylord I get really excited about typeface and colors, so I might start pacing eventually. But I'll try to contain myself. As Dean McFarland mentioned, I do teach visual communication here in the college. I'm also a proud alumna. I graduated with my master's in 2011. So I've been teaching public relations visual communication for about 3 years now. And I'm thrilled to be among these very distinguished alumni who we have speaking here today. This has been a fantastic morning. I tell my parents, because they're always like, what's public relations? And if any of you public relations majors probably understand that. So, like, what do you do again? So I generally say, well, it's kind of like graphic design, and I teach software and things like that. But what's different about public relations visual communication is that it's very strategic. So I focus a lot on doing research, finding out who is the target public, what is the organization, what's the organization's culture, right? And is that represented accurately in the organization's visual identity? And does that organization have a visual identity that will really sort of resonate with its audience? So it's a lot of branding. And before we get started, Ms. King was speaking this morning, and spot her here, but one thing that she pointed out was, you guys are the future, and this is kind of off the cuff, and I hadn't planned it, but I'm feeling inspired. Last weekend, I was home visiting my parents, and my dad's had a friend over, and he said, oh yeah, you teach college kids. Are you worried about the future? And I said, with absolute confidence, no hesitation, absolutely not. I said, they are an amazing group of students. It's an amazing generation. You guys have so much optimism. I think coming up in the age of social media, you're so savvy about world affairs, you're very civic-minded. So just in an attempt to boost your confidence, since we're all supposed to be very confident today, I just wanted to share that story with you guys. I'm very excited about what you're going to go out and do. But to the meat of the presentation, what is branding? And my text is so tiny and gray, I can barely read it, and you guys might not be able to either. But branding is just a style, a symbol, any sort of visual marker, but it can also be other sensory details, scent, things like that, that sort of identifies one seller's good or service as distinct from another seller's good or service, okay? So that's sort of the textbook definition. Some very recognizable brands over there. Apple. What do you guys think of Apple, the company? When you think about it as a brand, what kind of comes to mind? Innovative, yeah. What else? Widespread, sure. What about its visual identity? What about its branding? Yeah. Very clean, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of you guys have gotten the, iPhone, and it comes in the very sleek little package, and it's so fun to unwrap. What about the Apple stores? Efficient, modern, very clean. Even the floors, I believe, the granite or whatever tile, comes from a certain quarry in Italy. All the stores, right? It's those little details and sort of visual identity that create this, this personality that we associate with Apple, right? Which brand is this? Right, and it's only a little part of the logo, but how do you guys know that? Yeah, the color, right? They have such a distinct color. The shape, mere exposure, right? We've seen it so many times, and the colors are now so recognizable in those shapes that we can see just a little portion of the logo and we know it's McDonald's, right? So can a person be a brand? Can a person be a brand? Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So who is this? Oprah, right? So what do you guys think? First of all, who's Oprah's target audience? You can answer, it's not, go ahead. Not you guys, probably, okay? So maybe a little bit older, right? So I might be asking the wrong crowd, but what do you guys think of, what do you know about Oprah? Who is she? What does she do? What's that? Yes, yes, absolutely. What else about her? She's a philanthropist? Yes. Publisher, TV host. What else? Actor, yep. So she's a lot of things. She's a very accomplished, successful woman, right? And she has a very distinct brand. Even her magazine, which I think she does a really great job of, you see every cover is a picture of Oprah, right? And she's very tasteful. She's kind of exciting but tasteful, right? I checked out her Twitter feed, and I thought this was interesting. Those are her dogs, I assume. She has something like 26 million followers, which I'm just trailing close behind her in my own Twitter feed. But it's interesting. You notice with her header, one thing about Oprah's brand is that she's very approachable, right? People feel like they know her. People seek her advice. People trust her. They read the books that she recommends. I read about Oprah that she is fiercely guards her Twitter. So she actually personally writes all those tweets. Her brand team or publicists aren't around. She's very authentic. And if you take a look at her header, it's a very authentic image, isn't it? It's her dogs. She's managed to kind of crop out her, what I assume is a palatial mansion over in the corner. So it feels very approachable, right? And so I would say probably the most important thing about a brand, whether it's a company or whether it's a person, is to be authentic. Be yourself. You guys all have something very unique to bring to the table. A few other brands you guys might be a little more familiar with. Who do we see on the left? Miley, right? I had to use Miley. She's such a brand. Don't recommend that your social media profile pictures be anything like Miley. What about the woman in the middle? Mindy, right? What's her brand? How do we think of Mindy Kaling? What's that? I got a lot of answers at once. Quirky, comedic, yeah. Very smart, right? Sort of self-deprecating. I love her book. It's hilarious, right? And then Zooey Deschanel on the right. What do we know about her? What's her brand? Musician, yeah. What else? Miley's a musician. How is Zooey different from Miley? Miley evolved. She did evolve, yeah. She's sort of, and it's a great lesson. Your brand can evolve, right? Because she really has come a long way, for better or worse. So positioning. Let's talk about positioning. Brands sort of stake a claim in the minds of the consumer, right? So they create this unique quality, or they define this unique quality that makes them, again, sort of unique from the competition, right? And an example here, so Volvo staked out the word safety, right? You think of a Volvo, it's a nice car, it's a pretty expensive car, but you think it's safe. So other luxury cars, BMW, we're fun to drive, right? That's how we're going to distinguish ourselves. Mercedes, well-engineered. And so that kind of left Lexus with luxury. They were sort of the last to the table, right? So you've got all of these car brands, and they're all sort of expensive cars. But they've each sort of had this one word or phrase that makes you think in your mind, what is distinct about that organization, right? So how does that pertain to you? You want to find your niche. And Ms. King and the others on the panel have kind of talked about this today. Find your niche. What is it that makes you unique? And I want you guys, if you have a pen or even if you have your phone, just take a second and write down 5 adjectives that you think, and I'm not going to make you share, so this is for your eyes only. I might ask you to volunteer, but you don't have to do like a table sharing exercise. So just write quickly, whatever comes to mind, 5 adjectives that you think describe you. Just whatever comes to your mind, don't worry. Like I said, we're not going to show them on the overhead. Okay, you guys have your adjectives? It's not a quiz, so if you don't, it's okay. Okay, so we'll kind of come back to those when we talk a little bit about branding. So develop a positioning statement. So I want you, as you start to think about your brand, you want to develop your own positioning statement. So organizations, these companies kind of look at consumers. Who is your consumer? Who would be the consumer of your brand? Employers, yeah. At this point, right, setting out to become women of influence, absolutely, future employers, right? People who might be in your network, maybe distinguished alumni, right? So you want to develop your positioning statement and think about what makes you unique from your competitors. So who are your competitors? Yeah, everyone around you guys, and that's not in a bad way. Don't like claw each other's eyes out in the hallway. But right, you guys all have something very unique. Each one of you has something very unique to bring to the table. Maybe it's a hobby that you have. Maybe you're really good at knitting. Maybe you volunteered in an animal shelter, right? You all have something that makes you kind of unique, and you want to really sort of articulate that. And I have an example here, and this is not, I've just made this up, it's not from a student. I'm an enthusiastic and passionate communicator who would like to put my strong verbal and written communication skills to work to improve the world. Don't do something like that. I mean, you know, it's not bad. I think it's grammatically correct. I typed it up last night. It might not be. But it's just so generic, right? I mean, that kind of describes all of you. All of you guys, I assume you're here on a Friday morning. You're passionate communicators. I think based on your major, you probably have really strong writing skills, right? So that's everyone. So think about what makes you unique. Don't be afraid. You don't have to put, in fact, it's probably not a good idea to put your positioning statement on your resume. It can really just be for your eyes only to kind of guide your own brand, right? But as Ms. King said, what message do you want the world to know about you, right? So how is this going to be, what's going to be your message? So this is a great one, and this is from a student. I tend to approach any task with a creative mind. My solutions and ideas are always out of the box. The greatest compliment I've ever received was when a professor told me, when everyone zigs, you zag. I loved that. And I had my students do this last semester, and this student told me that quote, and I said, that's got to go in your positioning statement, because he's absolutely quirky, and he's funny, and he's creative, and he might not fit in with certain company cultures, but he's going to be a great asset to a lot of different companies, right? So it really, in just that sort of couple sentences, encapsulates his personality, maybe what's different about him. So don't be afraid to let your personality show through. In fact, try to let your personality show through, because that's really going to drive your brand. Create a mood board. Deploy Pinterest. Are you guys Pinterest users? Good, okay, so am I. It's a great tool for a mood board. So what is a mood board? A mood board is just sort of a compilation of visuals that you find attractive. It could be old postcards. It could be photographs from a trip. It could be advertisements that, in my case, you tear out of a magazine, because I actually have a bulletin board that existed once where I pin everything, not digitally. Paint chips, right? So maybe there are certain colors that you like, a certain style of photography, right? So Pinterest is great for this. I have some examples over here, and it's a little hard to see, but different mood boards that some of my students have put together, and I asked their permission to use these. Some of them might be in the audience, so I figured I better ask. That's my mood board. But you'll see in each sort of mood board, the column to the left is one complete mood board, and then 4 other to the right. You can kind of see a style start to come out, right? Certain colors, bright colors, certain typefaces. The one up to the right, sort of neutral colors, kind of organic, right? And when my students work on this, I tell them, just, you know, in your case, if you're going to use Pinterest, just pin everything you like. Don't worry too much about, like, is this going to go with this? Just sort of pin with wild abandon. Just have a board, call it my mood board, my brand, and just pin everything that you like that catches your fancy. And then you want to go back and think about your positioning statement. You know, are you elegant? Are you trying to work in fashion? Are you, you know, really motivated? You want to be in the C-suite in corporate America, right? Sort of what's your positioning statement, and then what visuals here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about visuals. What visuals here sort of accurately represent that, right, as part of your brand? Get a good headshot. How many of you guys are on LinkedIn? Raise your hand. Good. I should see every hand up. Good. Twitter. Okay. Facebook. You're just like, leave your hand up. Instagram. YouTube, right? So many different social media platforms. Again, going back to Ms. King's good advice, someone is always watching, right? Someone is always watching. This is the kind of thing you want to avoid. As far as social media go, obviously your LinkedIn is public, right? You're creating that for your target audience, for potential employers. Any other social media site that you have, you need to kind of think, am I going to use this professionally? Is it public? Have one of your friends, or no, that's a bad example because your friends know you. Have sort of a stranger, but who you're comfortable asking, like, I'll do it if you want. Look at your social media. What does he or she see, okay? Any of those public profiles, you can have personal stuff. You can have vacation pictures. There's kind of the 80-20 rule. 80% sort of professional, your brand, 20%, some funny anecdote, or here's my cat, eating food on the counter, which I did last night, but I didn't tweet it. So, it can be a little personal. It doesn't have to feel rigid or barren or sterile. It should show your personality, but keep it professional. And I'm looking at Anna because she said last year, I think in a social media seminar she gave for PRSSA, she said, keep it classy, but be sassy. That was I remember that, stuck out. Keep it classy, but be sassy. So you want to think about your headshot. You want to get a good headshot. And you want to use that consistently on all your different social media platforms that are public, okay? So if the world is seeing your Twitter, the world is seeing your Facebook, the world is seeing your LinkedIn, use the same profile picture for each one. Again, that McDonald's logo, we just recognized a tiny part of it. You want people to see that picture of you and know who you are, right? Now, as far as the headshot goes, this is obviously what we want to avoid. And now I'm really going to embarrass Anna. I asked her if I could use this. I didn't know she would be here. This is Anna's headshot. This is a great headshot. It's professional, right? She looks very nice. She looks very confident. But it's not too formal. So don't feel like, you have to go buy a business suit and go get the, black and white, or that gray background and be looking really serious and professional, because that might not be you. I mean, if you wear a business suit every day, do it, right? But if not, go with what you're wearing today. Something that's formal, something that's nice, but something that's you, that you're comfortable in. Okay? It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You don't have to get a professional headshot. You want to think about background, right? You want to sort of focus on your face. So that's a big sort of point that I wanted to make. This is a great headshot, and then depending on which social media you're using it on, like for LinkedIn, this would be a great headshot. For something like Twitter, and this is tiny, but that's actually a good example, think about how a person or organization's profile picture looks on Twitter. Think how tiny it is, okay? And you can see over here this one professor that I follow, Alberto Cairo, he's done a nice job. You can actually see his face, even though this is sort of tiny, right? But that's what a Twitter feed is going to look like. So I have to thank you guys for inviting me. It sort of inspired me to update my own Twitter profile, which was in desperate need of a refresh. I was doing this Wednesday, and I was like, well, I'm such a hypocrite. So I took my own headshot and zoomed way in, and it felt sort of awkward. It was so huge. And I put it on my Twitter. But you want to have a really good sort of close crop as far as Twitter, because in that feed, it's going to look so small. And you want it to capture people's attention. So you want to be careful about doing like a group shot or even an action shot, which generally could be great. But think about the platform, think about how people are going to be viewing it. Okay. Quick color guide. So as I mentioned, I can get pretty excited about color. Actually, lecture on it for an entire week in my class, as well as typography. So I'll try to sort of keep it a really basic overview here. But you want to think somewhat strategically about color. Don't let it stress you out. I mean, all colors are great. So don't, stay up at night being like, should I be red or purple? I don't know. At the end of the day, content is king. Okay, content's going to get you the job. But you want to think of visuals as sort of, I tell people it's kind of like wearing a nice outfit to an interview, right? If you show up and you look really sharp, people are going to say, oh, okay, come on in, let's talk. And then you've got to earn the job. It's the same with visuals, the same with a business card, the same with your profiles on social media. If it looks good, if it looks sharp, it's going to catch people's interest. It might help you stand out a little bit. It's not going to get you a job, though, right? That's the content. That's what you've done. So some different colors here. Red, very passionate, enthusiastic, right? Oftentimes, so like Tylenol there, sort of medicines will be red. It catches our attention. We sort of think of emergencies. So it can sort of go both ways. Orange is a very friendly color. I like orange myself. It's often associated with budget-friendly options, so like the Home Depot, right, saving money. It also connotes creativity, movement. So it's a very fun, sort of approachable color. Similar to yellow, also very fun, can often be sort of childlike. Yellow can be, you have to be careful with it as a color. First of all, it can be very hard to read, case in point. It's very hard to read yellow up there. It's also a little bit fatiguing to the eye, so you want to use it minimally. You probably don't want to do like a business card with an entire yellow side, okay? But as an accent, it can be a great sort of fun color. Green sort of connotes the environment, right? Being in touch with nature. Research has shown that physiologically it can actually relax us, so it's sort of calming to look at. So if you want to come across as relaxing, maybe you want to go write for a yoga magazine, right? You might brand yourself with some light green. Again, sort of earth-friendly, right? So anything natural, organic, we tend to associate green with that. Blue. Blue is America's favorite color. It's used the most often. Depending on the shade of blue, it has some very different messages. So light blue tends to be tranquility, peace. Sort of standard blue is friendly, trustworthy. It's a very friendly color. Darker blue, so navy blues, very trustworthy, traditional. You'll see a lot of financial institutions using navy blue because, again, it has that sort of connotation of trust. I think I kind of had the answer on my slide, but think of all the sort of the most popular social media networks. What color is their logo? Blue, right? Twitter, LinkedIn, WordPress, Facebook, right? Blue, because it's a very friendly color. It's kind of a safe color. I sort of skipped over this with red, but that question sort of reminded me. News networks, think about red and news networks. CNN, BBC, YouTube, right? So breaking news is excitement, this passion. Maybe you want to go into reporting, right? Being a journalist, being a head at the Miami Herald, maybe you want to use red, okay? Lastly, purple. It's a very regal color. See Cadbury chocolates. Lighter purple makes us think of spring, right? I had to add this one in here. I told Ms. Radford this is for her. You'll see that little Olay. I think that's Regenerist. Is that Regenerist? She does. She heads up for Procter & Gamble, the Olay Regenerist line. And the reason that I added that is when I was learning about color theory, it was a couple years ago, I was in my early 30s, and it said purple because of its association with spring and with this sort of, rebirth, is often used in anti-aging products, for the color of anti-aging products. And like I said, I was in my early 30s, and I was starting to think about these kind of things. I know. Well, we always worry too early, right? It's marketing. So I opened my medicine cabinet. I was like, oh, God, like 3/4 of these things are purple. And so I look, Olay Regenerist actually uses red mostly for their color, which is interesting. But I was like, well, they must use some purple. I gotta check this out. Sure enough, there you go. But generally red, which I think is a great choice because it stands out on the shelves. Not a lot of red anti-aging. So I tell you that anecdote because color can go a long way, right? It can really sort of say, we just glance at it, we don't think much about it, but it can be very strategic and it can sort of send a quick message. Right? So think about your color strategically. Typography, my favorite. I wish I could teach you everything. I can really nerd out on typography. A couple sort of basics that you want to know. And typography, as far as social media goes, you won't really have too much choice in what sort of typeface you're using. It's pretty standard across all the platforms, and that's fine. If you are getting into maybe doing a business card or a resume, you might want to have sort of a basic understanding of typography. So sort of the big categories, serif and sans serif. The most common serif is Times New Roman. You guys are probably all familiar with that one. And what distinguishes the serif, you'll notice on the left column, those are all different serifs. So Garamond, Baskerville, Dido, Rockwell. Serifs have the little feet at the ends of the letter strokes. That's how you kind of distinguish a serif. So the serif is basically just a little foot. And then you have a sans serif, so sans in Latin, I believe it is, without. So sans serif is without those little feet, okay? So over to the right, Avenir, that's an example of a sans serif. Probably the most commonly used sans serif is Helvetica. There's a great documentary on it. If you haven't been in my class and seen it, check it out. So sort of these typefaces in these general categories have certain associations or messages that they send. So the serifs over to the left, generally much more traditional, more formal, okay? So if you want to be taken very seriously, if you're interested in a job in corporate America, you might want to think about using a serif if your experience is more traditional. Sans serif generally feels a little more casual. It's a little bit more modern, a little bit cleaner. Say you're wanting to go work, you're really creative, and you want to work at a tech startup, you probably want to go with a sans serif. It has sort of that modern, playful vibe, okay? So those are very sort of general overviews. Now, within each category, there are other distinguishing traits. You'll see over here, Garamond's sort of an old-style serif, so it feels very traditional, very handcrafted, sort of charming. Baskerville is kind of a traditional or a transitional serif, so it's a little more modern than Garamond, but you still get that idea of tradition. Dido is a modern serif, and I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. It's got a lot of contrast between the serifs and the letter strokes, and it feels very elegant. So Dido feels very elegant, sort of modern. And then Rockwell, finally, a slab serif. That's very sort of industrial. It feels a little bit mechanical. Okay. So kind of the basic personalities of typefaces. One thing I'll tell you, there's some great type resources online. So if you get to the point where you're designing your resume, your business card, and you have no idea where to start, just Google great type combinations, typeface meanings. There are tons of great resources out there. Some examples. So any Vogue magazine readers? A few of you, yeah, a few of you guys, okay. Vogue magazine, that typeface they use that's very recognizable, that's called Italian Dido. It's a modern serif. So what I was saying earlier, those modern serifs, Bodoni is one that I think a lot of like Word and design have Bodoni. Those are modern serifs. They feel very elegant, very fashionable. So if you are looking for a career in the fashion industry or you want to be a fashion blogger, you might want to think about using a modern serif. They are a bit difficult to read, so you don't want to use it for large amounts of copy. Probably not on your resume except for maybe your name or something like that. A couple other examples. Anthropology. Who's familiar with the store Anthropology? Okay, good. I was like, am I picking all examples that are too old for you guys? Because I love Anthropology. What do you feel about Anthropology? What's its brand? Yeah, chic, yeah. What else? Definitely chic. Boho, yeah, a little bit bohemian. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Any other, those are right. Any other additions? Deep thoughts on Anthropology? Okay, they use sort of an old style serif font, that Anthropology font. It feels sort of, again, handcrafted, a little bit antique. And if you go into an Anthropology store, you see their clothes. That's very much sort of consonant with their brand, right? Crate and Barrel. What kind of organization are they? What kind of company? Homewares, yeah. I've really lost you now. Homewares, okay, but very sort of, you see they've got Helvetica, which is the most popular sans serif font. It's very clean, it's very modern, it's also very safe, right? So you kind of know what you're going to get. It's not anything out there or crazy. So looking at that, Crate and Barrel, you can probably go in and find those white plates or those sort of simple, affordable wine glasses that you need. Okay. Pinterest. It's an interesting typeface. It's what we call a script or a handwritten typeface. When you get those curvy lines, it feels kind of friendly, right? And that's great for social media. It has sort of a very friendly feel. You have to be careful with script typefaces. They do generally connote, depending on what they are, sort of elegance, right? Very common for like wedding invitations or things like that. They can work in moderation if you are sort of, say you want to be an event planner, right? Or go into the floral industry. You might want to use a script font. Again, you want to limit it to maybe your name, headings, things like that. You don't want to write a lot of text in a script. It's hard to read. And finally, Volvo. That's a slab serif. So the one I mentioned in the previous slide, the slab serif, feels very mechanical, very sort of industrial. Volvo, Honda, I think there's one other car company that uses the slab serif. Okay. I couldn't resist, because you guys are new and I want to sort of indoctrinate as many people as possible. Over to the left, these are fonts you should never ever use. Don't worry about it if you used it last week on a flyer and you're like, oh God, I used Papyrus. Just don't do it anymore, okay? With typeface, when you're new to design, it's good to sort of keep it simple. So I know that feels boring sometimes, but when it comes to typefaces, sort of stick with the standard ones. Never use more than 2 typefaces in one tactic. So don't use more than 2 typefaces on your business card. Don't use more than 2 typefaces on your resume, okay? It can be kind of exciting to highlight and change different things, and it looks really fun, but really it doesn't. It just looks really cluttered, okay? So just keep the simple rule of thumb, stick to 2 typefaces for now. And never use brush script or Comic Sans. So once you've kind of done some investigating and you've thought about your positioning statement, you've thought about, here's where I want to work, here's the kind of company that I want to attract their attention, I want to impress them. You've created your Pinterest board, you've got a lot of different colors, some different maybe typefaces, you've got your headshot. You want to put together a style guide. And this doesn't have to be any sort of formal document. So I have my students in class, they create a style guide, and they say, here are the 6 colors I'm always going to use. Here are the types of photos I'm always going to use. These are the 2 typefaces I'm always going to use. yours doesn't have to be that formal, right? I'm not going to ask you to turn it in. But consistency with branding is very, very important, right? If McDonald's used a bunch of different colors, we wouldn't have recognized that logo. So it's really, really important when you are using color and typefaces and even imagery, photographs, to be very consistent with your style. Here's an example, UF. Almost every organization, I'm sure nationwide, I'm sure Procter & Gamble, has a style guide for its branding, okay? And that style guide will say, here are all the colors that we use. These are the color values. You guys don't need to worry about that yet. Here are the typefaces that we use. Here's our logo. Here's how you use it. Here's how you don't use it. Very, very specific guides. And that sort of ensures that repetition or that consistency of the brand, okay? And so you want to kind of do the same thing. Choose your 4 or 6 colors you want to use. Choose your typefaces and stick with those, okay, on your resume, on your business card. If you are using any kind of graphic design software for social media, stick with those typefaces. When thinking about business card and resume design, steal like an artist. So there's nothing harder, and this happens to me as well, when you've got some information you need to convey and you're sort of staring at a blank page and you're like, oh God, I have to make a resume. What do I do? How do I put it in here? It just looks so boring, right? Look around for inspiration online. That's what my students do. There are tons of great examples of business cards. There are tons of great examples of resumes. You know, don't copy exactly, but look for different ideas for layout, where you want to put your elements. Do you want to have 2 sides to your business card? Do you want to have all the information on one side? Do you want to have some sort of decorative logo? Looking online at different examples of different things that you like and don't like is a great way to get really good at design and sort of design something and it looks professional, okay? So look around for inspiration. Don't be afraid to do that. With a resume as well. So with you guys, I would say in communications, you want to keep your resume somewhat traditional, okay? Again, content all day is the most important thing on your resume. But if you want to maybe have your name in a different color, maybe an interesting typeface for your subheadings, you can do that. You'll find a lot of cool resumes out there from graphic design students, and they're just amazing, and they're beautiful, and that's really cool, but probably not for you guys, right? You want to keep it a little more traditional in communications. Consistency is key, so I've already kind of spoken to this point. Use the same typeface and color in your resume, use the same typeface and color on your business card. There's some great free tools. Canva, has anyone used Canva? Canva, it's like Canvas, but without the S. It's a great tool for creating graphics for social media. So if you do want to get into this stuff and create, you know, more than just basic colors for your Twitter profile picture, your LinkedIn, they have that new header picture. If you want to create some sort of unique graphic, Canva is a great resource for that. Keep that graphic consistent. So have the same header image on your LinkedIn that you have on your Twitter profile or whatever other profile you've chosen to make kind of your public face of your brand. Google yourself. How many of you guys have Googled yourself? Okay, good, yeah. I don't do it as much anymore, but when I was applying for jobs, it was like every day I Googled myself, which they don't refresh their cache that often, but good. You want to Google yourself. You want to know what's out there about you. Because employers, when you apply and you're interested, that's probably the first thing they're going to do if they're actually thinking about hiring you. And you want to see what results they're getting, okay? Now, generally with a Google search, you want the results that pop up. You either want it to be you, or you want it to be someone very different from you. So some of us have very common names, right? And that is what it is. But you don't want it to be any kind of confusion, like who is this person? Or you don't want it to be, you know, Spokeo or one of those weird sites that like culls information about you. You want it to be information that you've put out there. That's what you want to come up on a search. Check out the images. Look at the image results. What's out there? A lot of times it'll be stuff from your social media. But you want to be controlling that content, right? A great way as far as images to sort of get your own images into search results, name the image file with your name. ktapin.jpg is like every file I put on the web, okay? Because then when people search my name, it's tied to that image, and when they look at images, those are the results that come up for ktapin. And that's what you want to do. So name your files accordingly. Oops, switch this around. Make your visuals consistent across all platforms. So I've already sort of spoken about this. And really focus on one platform. Okay, social media can be overwhelming, as you guys know. If you're really visual, right, so you want to be a stylist, or go to work for Martha Stewart Living. Maybe it's Instagram. Maybe you're using that and you have it public, right, so people can see it, and you really create Instagram photos of your work or things that inspire you because you want to go into a kind of creative field. It might be Instagram. It really depends on what interests you. Personally, I use my Twitter more professionally. I follow a lot of design blogs, other professors who are teaching the same thing I do, and I tend to sort of push out information that's related to that. I do push out a lot of PRSSA information because I'm their faculty advisor, and we have lots of fun photo shoots all the time. So that's a large part of my feed, but Twitter is where I really focus. And so Twitter can be a great feed if you're in sort of a niche industry. Start following people in those industries, not just communications professionals. Follow publications in that industry. Follow researchers in that industry. Follow organizations that are in that industry. Become an expert on it, and put out content about that. Put out valuable content. Okay? So with social media, there's a lot of crap out there, right? So don't contribute more. Create some sort of value with whatever profile you choose as your sort of public face. Put out content of value, okay? So like no one really cares that you ate a sandwich, right? Keep up with the industry. Share articles that are relevant. I mean, that's what I do on my Twitter feed. I follow sort of design professionals and communications professionals, and then when I find a neat article about that, I'll tweet that out, and they might like it or retweet it or something like that. So I'm participating in that conversation. It's not just about, me and what I've done today. So sort of provide value in that niche field. Keep abreast of the trends that are going on. Again, for me, that's sort of graphic design, visual communication. But you all probably have your own niche, and that's fantastic. And that's what I love about communications, is every type of organization needs communications. So not only are we strong communicators, but we can also sort of focus on this area that really interests us and what our passion is. Create a hashtag. So I heard the panelists saying that before we got started with the previous panel. Again, you want to be owning the content that's out there about you. Create your own hashtag. Maybe it's Anna Gomez Arts, because Anna is really interested in working for the arts, right? Or for me, it might be PR VisCom, right? Create a hashtag. Use it when you tweet out or post out that kind of Facebook, whatever it is, that relevant content. Use that hashtag. Control the information that you're putting out there. Thank you. We do have probably about 10 minutes for questions, if that's okay, if you guys have any questions about branding, social media, typefaces. Yes, Elizabeth.
Why do you not recommend font like Comic Sans? What is the
It's a good question. Someone said about Comic Sans, actually the designer of Comic Sans in this book I read, he was defending it, and he's like, people who hate Comic Sans probably don't know a lot about typeface, and people who love Comic Sans probably don't know a lot about typeface. So it has this whole history, and it's considered sort of immature, childish, right? It has all these connotations. So if you're a graphic designer, you'd probably never use it, and people would be like, oh my gosh, right? And if you're not, it kind of screams amateur. And then again, there are different reasons. So Comic Sans, it looks a little bit playful, the way the letters are. So if you want to be taken seriously, right, I don't think your resume it's not going to carry as much weight in Comic Sans as it would in, say, Baskerville. It's just not going to look as serious. We don't think that, but it's absolutely true. If you glance at a document in Comic Sans and you glance at one in Baskerville, instantly you're going to sort of, actually this is interesting, I think it was the New York Times, although they don't seem like an organization that would do this, but I read an article in the New York Times. A news organization had run sort of this experiment. And so they posted different articles, it was the same article, but in different typefaces. And then whichever viewer looked at that article was sort of polled on the credibility of that article. Baskerville won. Comic Sans lost. So there is sort of research to back it up. Papyrus, maybe it's just personal. I don't want you to use it, but it's just overused. And I think a lot of times people will use those sort of typefaces like, oh, I want to be different. Times New Roman's boring, so let me grab Papyrus or Comic Sans. And those are sort of like also boring, but even in a worse way, because they're not really easy to read, and they have very certain connotations. So unless, maybe you want to go into like spas or, publishing for some sort of yoga magazine, maybe papyrus with the bamboo, right? But I mean, if you're going to go work for, say, Nationwide, and you're going to do, you're interested in the insurance industry, I don't really know what bamboo has to do with that, So just keep it traditional, keep it focused on the content. It can distract, I guess, would be the quick answer. Besides that, I just don't like it. Yes?
Right now for us, as looking for jobs, branding is very, our personal brand is very important. But when we get that job, we have to put on making sure that our personal brand is very consistent, because once you're in that company, you're advocating for that company and start to sort of improving it. So it's difficult to pursue our personal brand while we're still working for a particular company.
I mean, I think it's up to you. I think you have to make a choice. I guess I'll just speak to maybe social media in particular. I think you have to make a choice. Some of my colleagues, like one colleague, her Twitter feed is very much about her family and her kids, and that's totally fine. But I don't really look at it or feel the need to follow it because it's very personal, right? Whereas like me personally and a lot of my other colleagues use it professionally. So they're sending out articles about education, journalism education, visual communication, things like that. So I think it's fine if you want to kind of keep your personal brand. Let's say you have a blog and you love animals, right? And it's all about animals. There's no reason why you can't keep that up. And then just have, your work as sort of your separate. I think if you want to, say you're in insurance and you want to tweet relevant articles about that and the industry, that's fine. I know a lot of companies, probably big corporations, and I'm sure Ms. King could answer this, have very strict rules about social media use with employees. I think you generally have to say, opinions are my own. These are not the opinions of my employer. So I'd say number one, when you first get a job, one of your first priorities, find out what their social media guidelines are. Absolutely. But yeah, I think there's no reason you can't maintain kind of your own personal brand on this side, as long as it's not in any way offensive, right, or could get you in trouble, which, regardless of what you're doing, that shouldn't ever be the case. So. Did you, Ms. Keith? Yeah.
But what I will tell you is that depending on where you want to go and how far you want to climb, and especially at an organization that you really don't have an independent brand, so you're going to have to be very careful. It's like, when I get back to Columbus, they'll tell me every tweet that has gone out on me today. There
will be a lot.
So you do have to, I think what she's telling you is to be very safe with your brand, to communicate things that's very personal, but make sure that it is in alignment with the company that you're working at, because they do track it, they do follow it. And the higher up you go, they definitely follow it.
And the more careful you have to be.
The more careful.
Great question. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned being consistent with your style. How do you do that without being out of sync?
That's a great question. And one thing that I was actually going to point out that I didn't with typography is sort of avoid the font du jour. So there are certain fonts that are very popular at certain times. Right now, the Pinterest font, kind of that scripty font, is very popular. There's sort of some handwritten fonts, like Starbucks uses it, McDonald's coffee uses it, very, very popular. So you want to kind of choose visuals that are more traditional. I mean, red's never going to go out of style. Turquoise is never going to go out of style. It's always going to be a pretty color, right? So colors, you're pretty safe. Typeface, again, it's good to go a little bit more classic, for that reason. But I think with consistency, it can feel like, oh, it's boring maybe, or it's getting outdated. But I think you sort of have to just resist that and know that it's very important to sort of build that recognition among your consumers or your potential followers. But yeah, I would say as far as getting dated, really typeface is the only thing that runs a big risk of that. Maybe if your profile picture, if you're wearing like a really 2015 outfit, you might have to change that later. But that shouldn't water down your brand too much. Good question. Any other questions? Yes?
What do you think is the right time to make a business card as a student?
I mean, I don't want to scare you and say, what, you don't have one today? But I think, soon, anytime is a great time. You go to meetings like this, and it's a business card. What I tell people is it's not going to get you a job. It's not going to get you an internship. It's more of a sort of a ritual, right? A transaction like, oh, well, here's my card. If you came to this today and gave Ms. King your card, she's not going to run back to, Ohio and go, oh my God, I have to hire this student. Her card is so beautiful, right? That doesn't work that way. But she might keep your card, and if you, in a couple months, or you maybe follow up after this and say, it was great to meet you, I gave you my card. Maybe in 3 months you read an article in the New York Times about, the Department of Housing and Urban Development has changed their codes, and that's going to affect insurance. And you say, oh, Ms. King, I gave you my card a few months ago. Just wanted to share this article. You've probably seen it, but I thought, you might be interested. Hope all's well. So it's kind of, it can maybe help someone remember you. Again, they're not going to run home and follow up with you. It's more about the transaction and how you follow up and really, your experiences and what you're doing. But because you guys are attending things like this, maybe conferences, maybe you're going to, internships that might have socials or something like that, I think it's always great to have a card. Again, it's about the ritual. It's about the transaction. Yes?
So about resumes, you mentioned that like the graphic designers should have more artistic resumes,
Mm-hmm.
and that everyone else should kind of go a more traditional route. I'm trying to enter like the digital field, I guess, like social
Mm-hmm.
media.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be okay to kind of merge those two ideas in a resume, like have it a little more, I guess, stylized
Mm-hmm.
than just the typical like,
Mm-hmm.
listings or experience and things like that, or is that just something to stay away from?
No, I think you could do that. And I sort of, because I was speaking generally, I said keep it more traditional. But I often tell my students when they work on resumes, like any tactic in public relations, who's your audience? So if you need to have, at one time I had 2 or 3 versions of my resume. If you're applying to more maybe startups, they're younger, it's more fun. Maybe have a more fun resume. If you're also applying to corporations, and they have sort of an automatic process, then you're going to have the more traditional resume. So yeah, just think about who your audience is and maybe have a few versions. I think that can work really well if that's really what you're trying to get into, and it highlights that. Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. Mhm. Uh-huh.
It can kind of get overwhelming, and sometimes I wonder, is it better to be on all of these platforms, not updating them regularly,
Mhm.
if you don't have time,
Mhm.
or do you focus on, say, Twitter and my website or whatever it is?
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely, and because I get so overwhelmed, I really am only on, I think, Twitter and LinkedIn. Like, I don't have a Facebook. I don't have an Instagram. Yeah, focus really on one. Now, you can always cross-pollinate, right? So I think you can, like when I post a blog post, it automatically tweets out. So you can kind of cross-pollinate if you want to have a social media presence, especially for search engines, right? If you want to turn up, it's good to have like a Google Plus account, just sort of formatted. But yeah, really focus on maybe 1 or 2. If you're doing blogging, I think that's great. I think with blogging, you have to be very careful. I've run into this where it's like, I just can't post regularly. But the last thing you want as an employer, you're like, oh, I love writing and I keep a blog, and they search for you and it's from like 2009, right? It's like, well, she can't really follow through. So you have to be very sort of purposeful, but yeah, really focus on one. And then again, if you can cross-pollinate and sort of populate others. But if there are any that you're just not using at all and it's a struggle, just get rid of it. Or put it on, you can have sites, just make sure they're on lockdown private so people don't find you on them, If you're using it for your personal use or you're not updating it and you just don't want it to be out there, there are ways that you can have search engines not search you, and they have those kind of settings. So just, take a look at those. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
What do you recommend for someone like me, where obviously Google Media would never sign me up to say, sports reporter?
Yeah. So Kelly Price, sports reporter. If that's really what you want to do, you could have that, as one of your headings on your resume, sports reporting. When you upload files for your profile pictures, Kelly Price, sports reporter, right? Just name your file that .jpg. If you create your, maybe a hashtag, it could be, I guess Kelly Price Sports Reporter is kind of long, but like KP Sports Reporter or something, you know what I mean? But yeah, just attach those words to your name if that's what you really want to do, so that sort of becomes your brand. Yeah, but it's difficult. Yeah, it is. Right, and see, that's where I say it should be either you or someone very different. So at least if they pull up this singer and, she's had these like late night outs with, Miley, they know it's not you. So that's good at least, right?
I don't get obsessed with the whole building your brand out. Be obsessed with doing great work, performing really well, building your knowledge base, networking with the right people,
Absolutely.
Know what makes you distinct. I
Mhm.
love the whole find your positioning, find your brand, and then don't be obsessed with what is social media because it will come. You guys are young, and when I started out my career, I didn't have anything on social media, and now I do, but it was just a coincidence of opportunity. It wasn't my intention to go and run myself.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic advice. If you could spend, an hour a week working really hard at a good internship or an hour a week, composing your tweets for the next week, do the internship. I mean, as I said, content is king. And at the end of the day, your visuals or things like that, they're kind of superficial and they're not going to cut you down. But
Looking for someone to hire, if I go and Google your name, see what's out there, and there's some trashy person, I'll know it's not you.
Right.
Because I just interviewed you, I've just seen your resume. So don't get concerned about it. But, reach that in.
yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Yes. Any other questions? No? All right, thanks, guys.
Take your class.
You can. You just need more time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.